Glad to have you back. It's the Business Daily right here on Trust Television. PWC Nigeria has released its economic outlook, projecting a real GDP growth of 4.3% for Nigeria in 2026. PWC say GDP growth forecast is predicated on inflation moderating gradually and the naira remaining broadly stable. These are some of the reasons it's given. According to PWC, the fiscal constraint persists, reinforcing the importance of capital efficiency and balance sheet discipline, which is indeed also very, very important. The report also examined how recent gains in macroeconomic stability are reshaping the operating environment for businesses, investors, and market as Nigeria moves into 2026 proper. Let's get a view of an expert, Adegboyega Adebajo, an economist and investment banker, joins me virtually from Lagos. Good morning, Mr. Adebajo.
Good morning, Yusuf. It's a pleasure to be on here with you once again.
Thank you so much. There are a few things that PwC did spoke about, but one area that I want us to start with before we go to some of the key indices is the issue of balance sheet discipline. How important do you think that is it?
Well, very, very crucial. Typically, any balance sheet speaks in terms of what your assets are and what your liabilities are. And I think the implied meaning to that statement has to do with the accumulation of debts by the government. Even if the debt is going to be used significantly for infrastructure, you've got to bear in mind that an accumulated amount of debt means payments in terms of both interest and principal going down the road. Now, for a monoproduct economy like Nigeria, where there's so much dependence on crude oil sales for revenue, that anything happens to the price of oil internationally, and you're going to have problems making your payments. So clearly, this is why the government feels there's a need to ramp up its fiscal capacity through the new tax regime. But then again, you spoke about it this morning. How easy is it going to be to put 200 million Nigerians into the tax nets? Well, if not 200, at least about 80% of that. So these are the challenges, and this is what the report essentially references. We need to be mindful as a country how we manage assets and liabilities, future debts, payments, and the capacity to generate revenue to be able to meet the obligations therein. So Yusuf, I take it that you can hear me?
Mr. Adebajo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, apology for that mix-up there in regards to issue around network. But I did ask about the report also talk about their forecast is predicated on moderating inflation and, of course, stability in the FX market.
Yeah, so that's a key thing. Although the indices coming out of government indicates that inflation has more or less been tempered, but it's still double digits. And when you do want a fair degree of development and improvement in the economy, you want to keep inflation at single digits. So there's still some work for the government to do in that regard. However, it's one thing to talk about the indices. It's another thing to talk about the populace actually feeling the impact of moderated inflation. It's yet to be felt on businesses. It's yet to be felt by households. And I think the report underscores that fact. Inflation needs to be kept as low as possible so people can end up having greater disposable income.
Indeed, but there is a report, a projection rather, from NBS this morning. They are talking about there might be artificial inflation from the month of December. Of course, which you expect the data from December inflation numbers to come out later in the week. What do you make of that projection from NBS?
Well, it's somehow it's inevitable, and I think the NBS is spot on. We all know what the funds flow in Lagos State tends to contribute to the economy. We are aware what's happened with what happens with Dirty December, the kind of price increases that came about in December, not just in terms of for those coming into the country, but everybody was impacted by it. Domestically, in terms of traveling, we saw the instances where transport costs rose significantly. And these things will dovetail into inflation figures at the end of the day.
All right, let's look at the PWC report now, what it actually identified. They identified 6 key issues that will reshape Nigeria economy performance in the year 2026. Of course, this cuts across both global and domestic forces. But let's take it one after the other. Monetary policy effectiveness. What do you expect? For a very long time, we saw the monetary policy, the tightening of monetary policy until, towards the end of last year, where we saw the gradual easing. What do you expect this year?
Well, it's interesting. The CBN has done very well in terms of the monetary policy. It's the policies that have been promulgated have actually resulted in the desired effects, as we see that with inflation. We've also seen what has happened with money supply, but there's somewhat sort of an easing slightly, with the central bank saying that Nigerians can actually take a bit more cash out of the bank these days. That may help because businesses feel there's just not enough. But then too much cash all of a sudden being available in the system can have its own dangers. The other concern regarding monetary policy is, yes, it can be that tight for businesses, but government remains the largest spender in the economy. And if you have a situation where we have the government spending increasing, not just annually, but you just need to look at the fact figures monthly, and you realize that there's that much money coming back into the economy. It's going to be quite a challenge, and the CBN is certainly going to be on its toes, keeping an eye on the amount of money in circulation. There has to be a limit to beyond which it will start to impact negatively in terms of inflation. So I think kudos to CBN for where we are right now, and they've got their work cut out going forward. And hopefully, on the fiscal policy side, there will be some coordination in terms of making sure that we do not have conflicting policies from both ends.
Indeed, but in terms of MPR this year, what do you expect from the Central Bank of Nigeria? Do you expect them to continue the easing where they ended last year, or you expect more like a tweaking or changes in the new year? Maybe a return to where we were before.
Well, I wouldn't quite say return to where we were before. It's going to be a very tricky year. And I chose the word tricky deliberately, essentially because we've got elections in the first quarter of next year. And that means campaigns should start probably by about June, July this year. You and I know what happens with campaigns. There's so much cash, not just money, but so much cash that is usually required for campaigns. So by third quarter, that's going to flow into the system. So what's going to happen? What should the CBN do? I'm certain they're looking to that now and planning ahead. The tighter they're able to hold the monetary policy right now, the better they're going to be able to control that influx of cash into the system. And that's going to mean more than anything that they are concerned with what's happening with inflation. A couple of times last year, I did try to project what the CBN's position on NPR would be. And I laugh at myself and I say both times I did get it wrong. When I expected a hold, there was a drop. I expected a drop, there was a hold. I think for the first quarter of this year, it's important to be observant, to watch. So the CBN, in my view, will probably hold, if not for January, February, and March, probably just for January and February. And there may be a movement in March, whether to drop or to raise, depending on the readings of the economy in the first 2 months. That's my view regarding the discipline.
All right. Another important point raised by PWC is the issue of fiscal sustainability and reforms execution. For us to be able to achieve that, we need a synergy between the monetary authority and the fiscal authority. Do you think, given what we have witnessed in the last 2.5 years, that is achievable?
Well, it's perhaps not so much a question of whether it's achievable or not. Perhaps it's more about the extent to which there's an effort to coordinate this. Both sides of government policy will be driving towards certain things. Fiscal policy is about raising revenue, and they're raising revenue so governments can spend some more. The monetary policy is tight right now, and the idea is to restrict spending or liquidity in the economy so as to curtail inflation. And that's why you sometimes have a conflict in both policies. The government certainly needs to spend. There's capital expenditure, the infrastructure projects to do, and to do so, it needs to raise money. The challenge now is that who pays the most taxes? Yes, it could perhaps be individuals if you want to look at the population, but what percentage of the population is in the tax net? And that therefore means you have a lot more money coming in from corporates. But the larger category of corporates, which are the SMEs, not the large corporates and multinationals listed on the exchange or not listed but doing great business, they will always pay their taxes. But the larger swath of businesses, the SMEs, the small, medium, and enterprises, they continue to complain about their capacity to grow their business because of inability to access credit. If they grow their businesses, then they'll be able to pay more tax. So it's a very interesting situation, and it's difficult to say which should actually come first. But I expect that those in charge of both sides of government policy, like I said earlier, will look at this. The drive to increase revenue is there. The drive to curtail inflation is there. In between those two extremes, we will find that government will tend to perhaps, let's just say, push some knobs here and there, and we see what we come up with. But generally, we look at the GDP that's supposed to grow, and it will grow not just in inflationary terms, but in nominal terms.
All right.
Yes, expect some growth one way or the other.
All right. In a way, domestic security and, of course, social pressures is also very key in this regard. How do you link these two to the growth that is being projected by PWC?
Well, domestic security continues to play a critical thing, and I looked at indications we've had of what certain sectors are getting in the 2026 budget. Defense, as usual, comes, pretty high. And when you think about the money being spent on defense, what is easily understood is that it's not an investment. Anything spent on defense is an expense. You buy a bullet or a missile. Once you fire the bullet, it's gone. That money is gone. It doesn't come back in any way. Neither does a missile come back in any way. You buy equipment in terms of maybe helicopters, guns, armored tanks, whatever the case. Those are equipment that need to be maintained, so they continue to be a drain. And based on their use, they certainly do not have any second-hand value, because the army is not going to sell them off to anyone. So money that's going into defense is not part of the investment in the economy, so to say. So we need to get security right so as to reduce defense spending. That is very important. Once you're able to reduce defense spending and move those funds into other more productive sectors of the economy, it starts to make a lot more sense. We can see GDP going higher than what is even being projected right now, certainly.
Pressure, how can that be handled? It's very, very important.
Oh, yeah.
when the
Yes,
large number of people are not being taken care of.
You said that, Yusuf, about the social pressure side. And for me, I look at what's happening with inflation, and there's no doubt about it that a lot of households are having to continuing to readjust. These readjustments have been taking place since 2023. So we're going into the third year of adjustments by households, by individuals, by families. And some families have had to take on the pressure more than others. I came across something somewhere that if taxation is going to be effective, then the government itself needs to look at the other side of that and ask what exactly are they providing for the population. And that's a standard equation. We do not have a social welfare system in Nigeria right now. Families, individuals are going to have to take on the brunt of that. And clearly, this always has an effect when it comes to elections, because people would happily want to sell votes just so that there is an inflow for them. And that's scary in its own way. So it's a distortion to the economy. It hides unemployment. It hides lack of productivity. And it can only start to be erased once businesses start to grow and more jobs are being created. And I think within the scope of the policies of the federal government, there is a need to think through creating jobs that can immediately start to give benefits to individuals in the population.
Indeed, there is also issue about consumer affordability constraint as well, which is part of what PWC also spoke about. There is uneven sectorial growth. This is more like a twin points now. How can you address this? What impact do you think this will have in this growth that is being projected for Nigeria?
Well, when you look at the sectors, you find that the services sector has been growing significantly. And clearly, that's one sector where you have minimum capital requirements. Those in services who account for what they do, it's a lot of intellectual capital in there. So it's not unusual to find what we have with services. The areas that require greater capital investments, it's going to take so much to go there. Now, only those big companies companies that have reserves can expand their production. Only persons with resources like Bua, Dangote, those who have gone into aspects of telecom or airlines that are generating cash, they are the ones that can actually go into sectors that ultimately would impact GDP outside the services sector. Agriculture used to be a significant one. It continues to be, but it's, punching way below its potential. If only the security aspects were dealt with and agriculture could grow as it is. And I should add, agriculture is also one sector that can actually create job employment easily with very little ease, and from which those who are engaged can get returns. So yes, it's the services that's growing a lot more. We need to look at those sectors. I'm certainly not talking too much about energy beyond what I've said about Dangote and Bua, thinking in terms of refineries. Dangote's got his refinery going. Bua is also building a refinery. But we've got to keep an eye out there because of geopolitical risks in the economy, in the global field, actually, not just the economy. First of all, we know what's happening in South America, in the Americas, and how that's going to impact oil prices, what it's done to China in terms of supply, what Iran is facing currently as we speak. Does that mean oil prices will go up? I don't believe the US wants oil prices to rise. They simply want to keep it at a particular level because it would be unfair for them to buy Venezuelan oil at lower than market prices. So they need to keep it at a certain level. So we will find all those interplays going. So for a country that's so dependent on oil, we carry a lot of risk in terms of how that would impact not just our revenue, but also the production, gross domestic production that we tend to see.
Indeed, geopolitical economies, and of course geopolitical global economics, and of course geopolitical dynamics there. Of course, the impacts you've rightly explained it there. But let's look at the role of digital economy and artificial intelligence. These are new technologies. I mean, they are key drivers of economic growth and development in many countries right now. How much of the advantage of this do you think we can take for us to be able to develop our developing economy?
Well, certainly, Yusuf, I can tell you that there are lots of Nigerians that are looking in that space. I've had some interface with some companies in that area, and it's interesting the way they're thinking. They're pretty much alive to what AI can do, what potentials AI has to be able to complement and enhance the kind of services they're giving right now. Even the telco companies you get SMSs that are AI generated. Your phone right now, I'm getting those SMSs. So that level of automation, that level of using artificial intelligence is coming in. What it will do will be to bring in greater efficiencies. And what I expect will start to happen is that those with the knowledge will start to look at other sectors where automation or the use of artificial intelligence is lacking. And they will start proposing to consult and implement new arrangements, new structures, new process flows where artificial intelligence and digitization is used to create efficiencies. Now, this has two ways. One, the topmost thing is that it will reduce jobs because you're going to be getting more with less. But at the same time, it sends a message that a lot of us need to upskill. We need to rekit ourselves and our knowledge in terms of being able to do what we do with technology for today. So the people who would lose their jobs and who will be relevant in a short enough time will be those who haven't taken on board the relevant knowledge and totally understand how to use digitization in what they do. So the PWC document is right in terms of the impact. And think about it, the way Nigerians outside the country are using technology and, making moves is significant. So you have them being seen as role models to a lot of Nigerians here. So a lot of stuff is happening. I can tell you that. And I expect a boom in that regards.
With the level of investment that we're putting in as a country?
Well, you would sometimes wonder whether it should be the government or it should be the private sector. I see the private sector driving what's happening in the digital sector more than anything. Perhaps what the government should simply do is to create the enabling environment. Personally, I'd like it to be private sector driven. And when the potentials are good, it will certainly attract foreign investment. This is certainly because sometimes government money can be inefficient. Government involvements are not oriented towards the level of competition which you want to see from the private sector. They're not oriented towards the level of innovation, adoption and adaptation which the private sector tends to give. So I think that sector should be kept entirely driven by capital from the private sector. It will grow because that's the future of the global economy, not just Nigeria. And it will attract the requisite capital as it needs. But what the government needs to do is create that enabling environment so that players in there will be comfortable and confident and feel secure.
Indeed. Talking about creating an enabling environment now, let's see how this issue of growth sustainability can be translated, into economic stability for the ordinary people. How do you think that can be achieved?
Well, that's quite a journey, Yusuf. That requires a lot of detail. Yes, we're talking about growth. And we've been saying throughout 2025 that what we're seeing in the indices and the statistics is not being reflected in the lives of Nigerians. So what you're saying is when can that start happening? I think people, first of all, should be alive to the fact that if those statistics are there and they're real, they need to start rethinking how they're doing their businesses. If you start to rethink how you do business, what's important in your business, and you start to change the way you do business. I would say this, that for any small or medium-sized business, you've got to look again at the market and you've got to change your model in terms of the way you do business. This was a discussion we were having concerning airlines. And I think part of the problem that sector or subsector, for instance, has is the kind of business model they have. So clearly what I would like to convey to everybody is start looking at your business model. Are you running your business on a structure and on relationships that are based on the way the economy was in 2023 and early 2024? Perhaps you need to look at it again as you get into 2026 and 2027. That's the only way you can redesign your business such that you benefit from what there is in the economy, you benefit from the stats, right. You benefit from the market.
All right.
That is the way to go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Adegboyega Adebajo. That's the much that we can take on this program. A lot to discuss, but time is always not our friend. Economics and investment banker Adegboyega Adebajo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Yusuf. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. With that, it's a wrap on the show today. We'll be back here again tomorrow. I am Yusuf Akogu.